Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hey, welcome everyone, and we're off here to another episode here on SimplyTrade. Really excited about this one episode. I'm kind of comparing it to, so y'all have seen like some actors and authors and stuff when they go to and they do their circuit, what they call their circuit. When something new is released, they go like to the Today Show, they go to the Tonight Show, they go to all the late night shows or whatever, because they're promoting their new project, whatever that might be. So this is my version of it. I saw a LinkedIn post from one of our friends of the show and personal friends also, Larry Hansen, that he and his firm joined the Sandler and Travis and Rosenberg firm, which is also a friend of the show and a friend of the podcast and ourselves too, and Global Training Center. So I decided I got to get these guys on. Let's talk about trade. Let's talk about what's going on. If it's not enough that they've already pretty much dominate the legal trade aspect of the world, now here they go and acquire another leader in the industry, and so now they're putting people at a disadvantage. There'll be a time, I guess, where the what is it called? The Securities and Trade is going to have to get involved and say, no, that's an unfair advantage. Anyway, so we have on our show, we have invited Lenny Feldman, which you all might know, obviously will know from the podcast, but also personally, maybe at ICPA or AEI and all these other conferences that he's always attending. And of course, Larry Hansen. Larry Hansen has been around and done a few episodes with us as well. But I just want to welcome you guys. Thank you for joining me here. It was actually quite short notice. It's been about 2 or 3 days that we planned this, and here you all are. Thank you all for joining us.
Great to be here.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Larry. Thanks, Lenny. Okay, so guys, I don't know, how do we want to start this? I mean, Larry, how did you go about this? How did you pull off this coup? Let's call it. I mean, to me, it's awesome. I mean, it's you're hooking up with the biggest law firm in trade. You know that's very reputable. And it's actually pretty nice to be able to be looked at by them to be even acquired. You know, and you have a backstory or something on that?
I can't say it was really difficult. I've known Lenny. We cross paths regularly at conferences, really countless times per year on these different things. And we started talking about, future, where things are going. Lenny's just a young kid, so he's just got a long future there. And I'm older in the tooth, and thinking, where's my end game on these things after a few more years of working of counsel. And I thought, well, we should talk about that. And so we did. And I could not be more happy here. Sandler and Travis is a name, as it's an institution. So there are really, really very few firms I would have even considered. And Sandler is really the top one. So I'm really so pleased that my associates, I have outstanding associates who are going to have a very good future with a very good firm. So I really couldn't be more happy.
So it's a really good setup. So, I mean, and then also a little bit of background, myself personally and my video producer who y'all may or may not know, his name is Daniel from the show. But anyway, him and I were contracted by STNR to cover one of their events, or it's actually I believe it's their annual meeting that they have with all their associates, all their employees. So the whole group was there in Florida. And so we got to meet pretty much everybody that works at Sandler and Travis, anybody and everybody that would want to come up and talk to us. We talked to, but we were doing some work for them. And I got to really know the firm. I really got to understand the culture of the company. And it's funny because that was a very common theme of the whole weekend. The culture. It's like people really like working there. They're not there because it's a job. They're there because they want to be there. And so anyway, Lenny, congratulations. And we also have Nicole, by the way, on the podcast that just joined us. But congratulations to both of you, since I know you all are the managing partners of the firm in one way or another. So congratulations on that. But anything that you might want to say or feel on how you merged or talked to Larry and his firm on that?
Sure. Yeah, we're just thrilled. Nicole and I and the team are just thrilled that Larry and his team agreed to join us. It technically wasn't even a merger, really. It was Larry and his team coming over to Sandler, Travis, and Rosenberg, which actually makes it a lot easier legally. That's a whole nother story. But, I've known Larry for decades. Nicole's known Larry for decades. We've all known each other. And over the years, we got to know his 4 associates as well. And like I say, Larry and his guys, they're Texas gentlemen. They're just such great people. They're such professionals. You meet Larry, you hear him talk. He's the consummate professor. He's the storyteller, and people just love him. And I said, hey, we're talking to Larry Hansen. People, I didn't even get to tell Larry this yet, but people, my colleagues saying, oh, I love Larry Hansen. Is this really going to happen? I mean, that's just Larry, So, and then I said on his associates, and I was talking to someone in another firm today, like, oh, I love Larry's associates. They're just such great guys. They're great people. They know their craft. They know what they're doing. They're so dependable, ambitious, and they're just such a pleasure to work with. So Lalo, you saw our culture, that it's about elevating people. It's about lifting people up. It's about mentoring people. And one of the cool things that Nicole and I always say, the mentoring always goes both ways. I'm mentored by our associates, the people who have been in business for a few years, because they get the technology, they get AI. If I don't understand that stuff, I'm a dinosaur. So they're our mentor, as well as our intergenerational team, where we have folks who have been practicing more than Nicole, Larry, or myself, approaching 50 years, and they're super relevant to our practice as well, and everyone in between. So that's what makes it really cool. And Larry and his guys get that, and we're just really thrilled that it's fitting like hand in glove. And we knew it would, and it's only been our first week, but just seeing the interactions and everyone working back and forth, man, we're just having a really good time doing this, and it's going to get even more fun. I wish they could have made it, by the way, Larry. We were trying to get this done so you can make it in November, so you could see Nicole and everyone do their thing. But man, now we're motivated to get everyone together even sooner. And they're going to be coming down to Miami soon for some really cool meetings. But really so happy that we're starting 2025 out with such a bang with Larry and his guys.
Nice. So, exactly. So, Nicole, continuing on with what Lenny said, and again, just because it was my personal experience, and you might have caught this or not, but when I went out there and I y'all hired me to do some work over there for your annual meeting, et cetera, when I met everybody down there. But I was saying how the culture, and that's how Lenny kind of took off from there. But I remember this saying. I always remember this saying, and it's appropriate. It's really not a saying, but I remember what like they used to say that Steve Jobs used to say. He used to say, and I may botch this, but the idea is there. He used to say, we don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire them to tell us what to do. So, what do you think? Is that like the consensus here, or the thought process with Larry's group?
Absolutely. One of the things is for years, well, first off, I am at the law firm, but I am not an attorney. I practice the government relations part of it. Fortunately, because I'm in the District of Columbia, I can still be a partner in a law firm because it's not a state. But for years, one of our founders, Tom Travis, used to always try to get me to go to law school. And I said, I don't want to go to law school. I don't want to. He offered to pay for it. I said, that's not the issue. If I wanted to be a lawyer, I'd be a lawyer. And he said, you need to be one. I said, I don't need to be a lawyer because I am surrounded by some of the most amazing lawyers and brilliant minds in this area that I've ever been around. So I don't need that additional stuff. And what I think the culture has been, and what Lenny was saying, is over the years, we want smart people. We want people who understand what's going on, who get the trade, who live the trade, who breathe the trade. And for them, it's more of a passion than it is a profession. And so because they are so passionate about it, it has become their profession. It's not that they went and this is their profession and then they're like, oh, I like trade. It's almost the other way around. And because of that, I think that's when you see people really get involved and really care about what they're doing. And they are wanting to constantly learn. Just like Lenny said, especially these young people, and I can say this, they're kids now. They come in and they have different ideas. They're like, here, I can get that for you. And within seconds, they've done whatever, click, click, click research. They've done something and they've gotten it. And I'm still going, okay, now which button do I push? It's so nice. And so, having Larry, he's done a phenomenal job in recruiting and bringing up and training some really amazing young attorneys. So we're so excited to have them and add them to our brain trust. It's like the expanding, it's ever expanding. So it's very exciting.
Right. Yeah. And I got to see a lot of that. Like I said, when I was down in Florida, visiting with you all, and got to talk to different folks. I mean, down from your paralegals all the way up to, of course, the founders. And it's funny how the message was literally the same. I mean, it was there, like they take care of me and I take care, because we take care of them and the firm, et cetera. Loved it. I loved it. And, but thank you. So, I guess just for the audience, you may or may not see, I don't know how they decide to publish this, but we recorded a lot of really cool bio videos and segments of the managing partners and also events that we're going. So I don't know if they're going to publish it internally or externally or whatnot, but you may get to see some of that and a lot of the fun that we had out there. But anyway, so that's coming soon. Let's talk about this week. I guess this week and next week we're winding down the current administration, and we're kind of trying to figure out if any of these comments are going to be true or not coming up here in a couple of weeks. Is it a saber rally or is it like really happening? You know what I mean? So I know Larry personally, like I know he has some opinions about that. Nicole, I saw you've been posting, meeting some of the new classes coming in, the new Congress and senators, et cetera. That is actually pretty cool. I wish I was a fly on the wall in some of those. Being a podcaster, I would love to like hear what you guys are telling these the legislators. Like what. I guess you were also there part as NCBFAA as well, and just representing an organization as a lobby group, et cetera. So that was pretty cool. So the floor is open. Really, anything that you all might want to say or comment on anything like that coming up. I know our audience would love to hear that.
Well, I'm going to jump in first. So my mantra for this year is don't take the bait. We're going to hear things. We've got to remember that things are going to be said. Ideas are going to be expressed. The complete opposite idea is going to be expressed. And then a third idea is going to be expressed. And what we've got to do is refrain from what I felt we did or at least I know I did, I know a lot of the companies did, is immediately react to the tweets, immediately react to any pressers that the president-elect and his team might have, and suddenly get all worked up. And so my thinking, and as I said, my mantra is don't take the bait. Let's look at what's going on. Let me give you a perfect example. So the president-elect has said, I'm going to put universal tariffs on everyone, 10 to 20%. And then there was a Washington Post article that came out and said, reliable sources in the course of conversations, that they're looking at priority industries to target, whether that be steel or computer chips or, certain other very specific industries. And then about 2 or 3 hours after the Washington Post article came out, there was a Truth Social post which refuted that, saying it's fake news. I'm still going to put universal tariffs on everyone. So what that tells me is that discussions are ongoing, right? So first it was, oh, great, it's only going to be a few industries, but the industries that were going to be impacted were really worried. And then it was, no, it's going to be on everything. And so people are frantic. What does this mean? What's going on? What's the truth? The truth is discussions are going on. It tells me that clearly a decision has not yet been made, that they are looking at options. One option might be priority industries. They are still looking at the president-elect's idea of hitting all industries, all nations, all products. So it may also depend on what happens in Congress, right? If they pass this huge budget reconciliation bill that's going to cost trillions of dollars, right now there is some thinking of some members of Congress, including the incoming administration, that, oh, we'll just pay for all that by increasing tariffs. Well, we've never used tariffs really to offset budget spending like this. So it's very different from the way that we've always tried to manage the budget process. And I think it depends on if that is accepted as a way to newly manage and have pay-fors for all of our expenditures, then we might see universal tariffs on everything, and depending on how big the spending is. So I think there's just a lot of factors. And my advice, I think, to companies is we're going to see tariffs. Absolutely, without a doubt, we're going to see more tariffs. But we need to take a moment, step back, realize how big they might be, and then, because we know they're coming in place, start thinking now about ways to mitigate those tariffs. And I think that's to me is sort of my advice for going into these next 4 years.
So my mantra has been the best offense is a good defense, because I agree, don't take the bait, but someone's going to take the bait, and it's going to be a big old fish taking that bait. And when you get Nicole and I talking about fishing, we're talking big fish out there. I know Larry's a fisherman, but we'll have to see. I'm not really, but I play one on TV. But there's going to be bait, and there's going to be some fish in the pond that are going to be captured. I'm talking about those tariffs. So I feel importers need to take stock of the current tariffs, number one, and if they're even applying them appropriately to their merchandise and what may be ahead. And I was asked this morning on another webinar, what is your starting point with everything else out there? And I say it always starts with classification. There are so many companies who are just still not classifying their merchandise properly, and that could be good and bad. It could be bad because if you're going to owe more duty, customs could go back 5 years, and they're going to get very aggressive on some of these provisions that they might not have focused on before. When the tariffs go to 5, 15, maybe 25%, it's going to happen. But companies may be missing opportunities, putting their merchandise in the wrong provision, and maybe they are not in a position to take advantage of those that might be escaping the tariffs. There's an opportunity now for exclusions, 301 exclusions in Chapter 84, 85 that a lot of companies should be taking advantage of if they have their classification right, okay? There was just a case that when it came out in December, the G&H case, this was my podcast last week on 2 Minutes in Trade that Nicole leads, and a lot of us support her on just about every day, thanks to Nicole. And there was a case as to, well, an exclusion went through the USTR, it was granted, and then lo and behold, Customs comes back and says, nope, your classification was wrong when you went ahead and got that exclusion, right, Larry? I'm sure you saw that. You're a scholar and all that stuff. And they said, hold on a second. The fact that there was an exclusion that was granted and CBP is part of that process, had to review the exclusion, means that I had a decision that equated to a ruling. The court said, not so fast. We're not granting you what's called summary judgment, just on what's before us. We're going to have to take this a little further because there's a dispute in the facts here. So not done yet. It's going to round 2, right, Larry? But the cautionary tale is, you get a ruling. You have to make sure your classification is right, even when you get an exclusion from CBP, from USTR. This one actually might have been a 232, if I remember correctly, from Commerce. But either way, the proposition stands. So classification, value, you got to look at all that. And why is this becoming even more important? And this is something else everyone's focusing on. The whole de minimis landscape is about to change. I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like a year from now in January 2026, but I will tell you this. It's going to look a heck of a lot different than it does now. And I'm not talking a year from now, probably 6 months, 8 months from now. We're waiting to see if these notice of proposed rulemakings are going to come out before this administration sunsets. I have reason to believe it's very possible, I'm going to say even more likely than not, within the next week or so, one of the 2 rules that CBP is working on could actually come out so that this administration could say, we've been at this for years. We're going to put our thumbprint on de minimis, and we're going to start changing the algorithm to it. Not only the procedure, the data that's needed, which is going to be very important for a lot of people, the efficiencies, what's within the realm of the possible, what parties need to be reported, who can even file potentially, who do you need to report. But in addition, potentially looking at the 301 duties and excluding those situations, the merchandise covered under China 301 from de minimis. That is going to be a duty levying event. As a result of those duties being levied on 301, people are going to have to look at their classification. They're going to have to look at how are they going to get those funds to CBP. That's going to be a seismic shift in the de minimis world. So there's a lot going on, and those fundamentals, that's why I say, got to go on the defensive, get back to basics, make sure you have everything right. And if not, you really got to look at how you're going to change that and improve it so you could take advantage of those opportunities that you might.
So that's real interesting, Larry. Let me ask you what you just said, Lenny. That's real interesting. Do you think this year or this new administration, more than in previous years, the current administration might, maybe not the administration, but Congress and our government, do you all think that they might be pushing a lot of stuff here before before Trump comes into office, just to get it on the docket or whatever? I apologize. I don't know much about how, a lot of how this gets approved or goes through the process, but as compared to other years, like, oh, here comes Biden, we better get all these in, or here comes Obama, here comes Reagan, here comes et cetera. Let's try to get a lot of things here, the like 11th hour type bills or ideas or whatever, pass through. Do y'all think that that's even more evident now than it was in the past, or is this common, or what's going on with that?
I think the whole world's holding their breath here. I have to apologize. I have a bit of a cold here, so you can get a not good voice here for this. I like Nicole's comparison to bait. I think it's more like an hors d'oeuvre because the real meat is is what happens next. Nicole's 100% correct. Oh, we have a lot of talk, and this president talks a lot. And everyone knows he talks a lot. He's talked a lot for a long time, whether he is the president or not the president. So he talks a lot. And the real meat of the thing is what he does on the first day or the first week or the first month or the first 6 months. That will be the real thing to look at here. And you're right, Nicole's right. If you follow all the bait, you're going to miss the bigger picture here. The real meat will be what he actually does. He's already positioned himself for using the law in a different way. The International Economic Emergency Power Act, or IEPA, allows the president to have a great deal of power if he determines by himself that there's an international economic emergency. And all presidents, from going back literally decades, Democrats or Republicans, have used the same form. I fill in the name of the blank of the president, find there's an economic emergency with respect to fill in the emergency, and therefore I'm going to do this. Very broad power, but not really been used in this context at all. But we'll see where that goes there. It's good to compare what Nicole's view and Lenny's view, because I'm more like Lenny in the idea. Nicole works inside the Beltway, looks at the policies, the bigger picture. Lenny and I work in the trenches. What is Customs going to do about these things? Classification is certainly a very large one, because if Customs are going to look at this much more closely here. And we've already seen this, frankly. We're just going to see a lot more of this. It is not just have you classified correctly. How well was your exclusion done? We've already seen cases where Customs has said, we see your exclusion. That's a great exclusion. It's for a different product. You described this product wrong in the first place. You have a nice gold-plated exclusion on the wall, but we need our 25%. So this is an example where I think that the lawyers can do a lot of good in terms of homework, doing the homework. And the homework does not begin on January 20th. It should have begun already. If you're writing exclusions in the past or in the future, they've got to be crystal clear, very accurate, very complete, and defensible going forward here. If your product changes, so now it has the same tariff number, but your product changes, Customs has gone back to the original submission you made and said, you envision product A. Now you get A minus. Maybe that's not covered as well. And so now you're going to have the fight. And Customs, frankly, it's their job to do that. Customs is supposed to protect the revenue. And there are people who are going to be sloppy on exclusions. There are people who are going to simply misclassify purposely in order to avoid a negative result. And Customs has a right to look at that very closely here. So my plan for the year is I think we're going to just see a lot more enforcement here. Lenny and Nicole are 100% right. You got to look at the bigger picture where the policy is. Don't pay attention just to the bait or the hors d'oeuvre, but the real meat behind it. That's going to happen in very short order as well. But most important of all is your homework. This is not a time to sit down and wait, think your answer is going to be found in the newspaper. It won't be found in the newspaper. It'll be found in your behind the scenes attention to detail. What is your product? What tools do you have under the law to protect yourself? But when doing that, make sure you do it wisely, carefully, to make sure you don't have any unintended consequences down the road. So sadly, I have to say, I think it's a really good time for lawyers, but not real good for real people out there who are going to have to do a lot more work on these things and have a lot more nervousness about going into business.
So back on the trade, are there any clues or any ideas as to how this might go with his current nominees for CBP commissioner and USTR? I mean, he nominated Greer and Scott, not in that order. I guess it's Scott for CBP and Greer for USTR. I guess Greer served under Lighthizer, I guess, and so I guess it's a lot of similar, unless he wants to go rogue and be opposite or whatever, but I'm sure not because Trump nominated him. So any clues or ideas on how trade may go? Like, is anybody going to go against his wishes and say, dude, I mean, because remember, USMCA is coming up for renewal in 2026. So we need to think about that. And so we're going to have 3 new presidents or head of state, I guess, as a prime minister, as in Canada, that are needing to, I guess, kind of hold their positions and stuff like that. But anyway, I'm just kind of curious. I'm looking way far into the future now. But I mean, like any clues or ideas on because of those 2 nominees? I'm sorry.
I mean, I could start with Rodney Scott that, he was the head of Border Patrol. And I had predicted to some groups that somebody from Border Patrol, it could be Rodney Scott. He was on one of my lists. Very well could be leading CBP. So here we go. And that's no different than what we saw in Trump 1.1, I should say, with the nominees there. Of course, they started with Kevin McAleenan, and then it moved to a few others, including Mark Morgan, who I had worked quite a bit with when I was co-chairing the COAC advisory group. But all real border people, border focus. And we all know it's customs and border protection. So it's really now border protection and customs, right? So we get it. We understand, and that's no surprise that that's a priority. But of course, that is somewhat disconcerting, or at least concerning to the trade community as to whether trade is going to be really second fiddle. And there's not going to be as much if you will, attention provided to it, not as much of an interest in innovation when it comes to trade, and trying to work in partnership with the trade community when you're really focused on your migration flows and, let's just say readjusting where migrants and people who've come over might be at certain points in time. I will say, I like to always try to find an optimistic note. At least when we did work with Mark Morgan and others in the past, they did learn and understand that if they are going to lead that 60,000 person agency, they have staff who are devoted to the full mission, which involves what's coming over the border, not only the people, but the goods. And I think you could really thread that needle, that if you don't control what's coming over the border, you don't enforce the bad, nefarious cargo coming in, you don't facilitate the good cargo coming in, then that's going to be a threat to economic and national security anyway. So I think there is going to be a lot of interesting discussions. And I would say to all of you, it's an opportunity for the trade community to work with the C1, the commissioner, all the way through the executive team and say, hey, we understand it's about border security, it's about safety, but you cannot achieve that goal if you're only focused on the individuals who are traveling through that border and not the cargo, and facilitating the individuals who should be going over the border and the cargo that should be going over the border. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. We had these conversations, 4 or 6 years ago, and I think we did get some traction, attention. I'm hoping it'll be the same way, but it's definitely going to be a bit of an uphill climb just to make sure that we get the leader from Border Patrol, formerly Border Patrol, focusing on the trade aspect as well.
Right. Yeah. So you got your work cut out for you, Nicole, and the folks over at NCBFA, I guess.
Yeah, and with respect to the question on USTR, I'd like to pull in a couple of other factors as well. So Jamison Greer, he was the chief of staff under Bob Lighthizer, former USTR in Trump 1.0. He worked with Lighthizer at a law firm before. He was chief of staff at USTR. He also went to the subsequent law firm where Bob Lighthizer was. He is very much aligned with the same line of thinking. Whenever I think he is very much aligned in that Lighthizer always wanted to do everything by the book. He's a great attorney. I mean, he's very, very much committed to the rule of law and ensuring that you follow what you're supposed to do. That's why I think there were a lot of controls that were in place with respect to some of the actions that went forward. I think Jamison Greer would seek to follow that same path. However, I think that path could be full of some hurdles that he may not be able to overcome. And two of those hurdles that I see immediately in my mind are the Secretary of Commerce nominee, Mr. Howard Lutnick, and the Peter Navarro, who has been nominated to be the Special Assistant to the President on Manufacturing and Trade Affairs. And if you look at the announcement for the Secretary of Commerce, Mr. Lutnick, Mr. Trump said that he is going to be in charge and have oversight of the USTR and tariff issues. USTR is an independent agency that is a part of the office of the president. Congress gave authority for making tariffs or taking tariff actions to the president. And so USTR is the entity that has always governed that, undertaken the 301 investigation, help implement the 232. All of those types of investigations and tariff issues and negotiations have been handled by USTR by the authority given by Congress. Now, I will also say that probably since Reagan or Nixon, I don't even know, I think it was Reagan was the first one who was trying to get USTR under the control or guidance, oversight of commerce. Congress has always fought them very, very hard to keep that independent agency looking at these issues. I foresee that to happen in this instance as well, because despite the fact that there is a majority Republican Senate and House, you don't have some people who are willing to give up that authority that they've given to Congress. So he's going to have to deal with Mr. Lutnick, number one. Number two is Peter Navarro. Peter Navarro was the person who sat down the hallway from President Trump during his first administration. And according to some of my friends who worked in the White House and worked directly with Mr. Navarro, he is the one who was constantly bringing up more tariffs, put on tariffs, got to have tariffs. If you look at the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, there's a chapter on trade. Mr. Navarro wrote one of those chapters on trade. His is, we got to do the Tariff Reciprocity Act, which would be the United States. If Brazil applies a tariff of 35% on apples and we apply one of 15, then for Brazilian apples, we apply 35. If the Chinese apply a 45% tariff on apples and we do 15, then we apply on Chinese apples the 45%. So you can imagine the nightmare that would be for customs to try to implement, number one. But he's really focused on this Tariff Reciprocity Act and focusing on dealing with the partners with which we have the trade deficit. So you've got a situation where these other people are very, very strong personalities. Jamison Greer is a great guy. I worry that he doesn't have the same level of energy, excitement, gravitas with Mr. Trump that these other two do and will have. So while I think Greer is going to be someone who's going to try to follow the law, I think it's going to be difficult for him to try to keep these trains on the track. And there's not going to be any guardrails. And just trying to keep him on track, I think, is going to be difficult. And I hope he's up to the task. Let's put it that way. I don't think he'll have any difficulty getting confirmed by the Senate.
Yeah, the discussions between Commerce and USTR, I don't think the President-elect Trump really knew that subtle difference here about what office was under another office. I'm looking ahead toward what happens next on that debate here, because on one hand, it's one thing about the tariffs, but the word we're not used here is the word retaliation. There will be retaliatory tariffs here. retaliatory tariffs are going to be very difficult for the Department of Commerce's other job. Department of Commerce's other job is to really support exports. We are big on exports. And if you are the same person that is in charge of export development, but also handling retaliation because of against our exports. We saw this in 2018 with the soybeans. All of a sudden, there was a retaliation on the soybeans, and the U.S. farmers were all of a sudden very, very concerned about this idea of tariffs, because some of them is not just the Tennessee whiskey was one of them, but the soybeans. And soybeans are an outstanding example, because when the counter soybean tariffs were put against U.S. products, the world market had to find another place for soybeans, and they found it in Brazil. They went to Brazil and said, well, Brazil said, we make a lot of soybeans too, and here's our contracts. And some of those contracts aren't coming back to the United States here. I mean, there's retaliation here. So looking down the road, how they handle the retaliation will be something to watch for. But I do agree with Lenny as well. I think that the having a U.S. Border Patrol person gives us a very clear prediction of where they will be. But when I heard that, I took that in stride, actually. I thought, okay, it really doesn't matter. We've had quite a few, many examples in our lifetime of commerce or customs commissioners who had nothing to do with customs at all. It was a political position for the longest time. And it was sort of rare to have somebody even knew what a tariff schedule was. And we all survived that, because it really did it was the professional customs staff has lasted over the decades, and you got to respect them for that. I want to know who will be a new Office of Trade. That'd be the real meat and potatoes people who really work on these things here. There's sometimes talks about President Trump wanted to put loyalists in a high level, not really an appointed position, not Office of Trade, just a loyalist will be the president's fly on the wall. And that will disturb what is otherwise a very good agency who can handle these things despite the politicians. So I'm hoping that Customs is, Nicole's right, they have a difficult job. Well, this soybean coming from Brazil will have this duty, but not from this place. There's a different duty. And then it'll be a certain periods of time. And then importers are trying to plan ahead for months about their product flow, their supply chain. It's all very difficult for them. So it's going to be difficult for everybody for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, in the interest of time, I don't want to take too much more of your time for all three of you. Any last words? Doesn't matter, trade, personal, whatever, whatever you might want to wrap up with. You're free to anything else.
I think it's important for trade to talk. One thing we learned about during the election, there is a general level of misunderstanding about trade. That sort of shocked me, but that was the most shocking thing for me. There were a sizable number of Americans did not know that duties on Chinese goods are paid by the Chinese. There's a fundamental misunderstanding about our international trade system, our procedures, our processes, why we do certain things, why we have tariffs, why we have the WTO. There's a good opportunity, I think, for trade professionals such as ourselves, but organizations like AAI and others to articulate the goals of trade. Why trade is a good thing to have and should not be messed with here. But I think some good vocal opposition to some of these things.
I was going to say, just really make sure that you get accurate information. There's going to be a lot of misinformation, I think, that's going to go out there. There's going to be a lot of opinions on things, but opinions does not equate to fact. It does not mean it's accurate. Get out there, go to the association events, whether it's, the Houston or Florida customs brokers, the national customs brokers, they work really hard in getting accurate information. The American Association of Exporters and Importers, AFA Footwear and Apparel, where Nicole is a regular, a lot of us go there a lot. Get on webinars, and make sure the webinars, frankly, are provided by reliable sources. Sometimes I think the three of us are shocked as to the type of information that's provided at webinars or seminars, not always accurate. But go on webinars. I'd like, of course, to say we have some good ones. So, go on, listen to them. Brokers need to do this now under continuing education. Go to your broker. Your broker is really a reliable source as well. And get your information. Read the trade report from STNR. Read International Trade Today. Whatever's your go-to, because it's going to be changing really quickly. So just make sure you stay on top of it so that you know what's changing. And again, what is real and what isn't necessarily sending you in the right direction, which could lead you maybe to some unfortunate consequences.
I'd add one more. Listen to our 2 Minutes in Trade podcast. It's about 2 minutes. What's really funny, one time I had, was on a conference call with someone, seeing them first face to face on a video like this, and the gentleman says, "Oh, hey, you're the person behind 2 Minutes in Trade." He goes, "I listen to it every day at 1.5 times the speed." And I go, "It's 2 minutes and you listen to it at 1.5 times the speed." So, but we tried to, I tried, and Lenny and some of my other colleagues, we try to cover, like, what's happening, what's really going on, what are some of the things, a lot of inside the beltway stuff, trying to give people an idea. And I think we also need to remember that while we right now have talked today really focusing on the administration, that a lot of the changes are also going to be brought about by Congress. And so we have to watch what's happening on the Senate and the House and what laws are actually going to pass, because those are going to impact trading as well. As Lenny mentioned, we potentially have some notices of proposed rulemaking that may be coming out from the administration with respect to e-commerce, but the law needs to be changed to make some significant changes. It's very possible we could be seeing a 21st century customs framework agreement. I like to say we should be talking about the 22nd century, since we are already in the 21st. But we could be seeing laws that are going to come out that impact that. We're also seeing the tendency for Congress to try to pass different laws on China and on other countries. So I think we've got to watch not only what the administration is doing, we've got to watch what Congress is doing. And as both my colleagues have said, Lenny and Larry, that when you're looking at the information, like I say, don't take the bait, slow down, get the right information, get accurate information, and then, let's think of a way to address it, educate it, mitigate it, or resolve the issue. So I think that's sort of my advice going forward.
Well, thank you all. I mean, this was very informative. I'm sure we could have gone another hour or so, but anyway, there's so much to talk about. But thank you all for joining me, and hopefully we can have you all here in the future. And of course, I know for sure I'll run into some of you at conferences, because that time of year is coming here pretty soon. So, so anything else? You all, whoever's listening to this, you can catch how to contact any one of my guests today, Nicole, Larry, and Lenny. We have their links or their contact information on the show notes. Watch that. Go down to that, or if you're watching on YouTube, you should catch that also on the description for the show. So thank you all so much. Hopefully this has helped you at least kind of kick off here the year a little bit and get a better understanding. So I know everybody's confused. I really love all this advice, is don't follow the bait. I think that's what we'll call the show, Don't Follow the Bait. So anyway, thank you all, and have a good day.
Great. Happy New Year. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Thanks, Lalo.
Thank you very much for joining us. SimplyTrade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, or would like to sponsor SimplyTrade, or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at SimplyTradePod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. SimplyTrade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by SimplyTrade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only, and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.